John Mark Comer, who I previously mentioned for his book God Has a Name, has a new book out called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He begins his broadside attack on hurriedness by invoking the great and terrible act of 1370 AD. An event happened in 1370 that was so momentous that it would change the course of human history forever. What happened in 1370, you ask? Nothing less than the advent of the first public clock tower in Cologne, Germany. Before the invention of the clock went mainstream, time was inexact, estimated. The question, what time is it, was answered by looking at the sun. Historian Daniel Boorstin wrote this about the rise of the clock. Here was a man's declaration of independence from the sun, new proof of his mastery over himself and his surroundings. Only later would it be revealed that he had accomplished this mastery by putting himself under the dominion of a machine with imperious demands all its own. Then, in 1879, the next seismic invention was pushed onto an unready world: the incandescent light bulb, invented right here in New Jersey. As John Mark Comer notes, before the invention of the light bulb, the average person slept 11 hours a night. Before the light bulb, you went to bed when the sun set. You got up when the sun rose. The rhythm of your life was based on the rhythm of the sun and the movement of the earth as it turns on its axis. Amazingly, the very pattern of our sleeping changed. After going to bed at 7 p.m., everyone would wake up around 3 or 4 a.m. People would get up and do something. They'd read or they'd talk. They'd light candles and have, get this, time for themselves. This little break in the nighttime sleep was a time that an employer couldn't seize on. No email, no text messages to check. It was time that you couldn't go out into the fields and work on the farm. It's the middle of the night. It was time for you, for your family, every night. In fact, there's a whole series of devotional books which were published to help people pray during this nighttime period of living. And then people would go back to bed until the sun woke them up again. They called it first sleep and second sleep. Read a book that was written long enough ago, and you'll hear people talk about those different sleeps. I mean, oh, how things have changed. Today, doctors suggest that we all get 8 hours of sleep a night, and people just laugh. And we're busier than ever. It's not just a clock tower in the center of town or on the church steeple, and not even just on our wrists, but we carry around a little box that tells us what our schedule is, how to get from here to there, what our to-do list is, and it helpfully gets us messages at any moment of the day or night. Comer mentions a Senate subcommittee meeting in 1967 where all the technological advancements were being discussed. It was predicted at that meeting by an expert that all of the emerging time-saving machines and devices would, by 1985, reduce the average American work week to 22 hours a week, and for only 27 weeks a year. The issue that the Senate started to grapple with is what will Americans do with all of their free time? I mean, it's funny until it isn't funny anymore. With all the expansion of the workday and work week, the average worker in America today works a total of 4 weeks more per year than they did in 1979. That's a month more every year. While years ago, leisure time was the sign of wealth and importance, now busyness is the sign of your importance. The super wealthy don't just sit around on their yachts all day eating bonbons anymore. Now we read articles about how the titans of industry get up at 4 a.m., run 5 miles, do yoga for 45 minutes, and then get into the office before 7 a.m., checking emails and trading stocks at all hours of the day and night. The fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. If you read through the first several books of the Bible, you'll hear this commandment issued again and again. The Sabbath is considered the sign of the covenant between God and God's people that was forged on Mount Sinai. Just like circumcision is the sign of the covenant with Abraham, and the Eucharist is the sign of the covenant through Jesus, Sabbath is the sign of the Mosaic covenant. The early books of the Bible talk about it being an everlasting covenant, that all people in the land were to take a Sabbath, the Jewish people, the non-Jewish people, and even the animals were to rest. And the punishment for violating this commandment was death. Obviously, there is something to this commandment that specifically emerges from the Israelites' new freedom from slavery. They had just spent 400 years working 7 days a week in Egypt. Now, as a free people, their worth, their identity was not to be tied up with just their work. They were to rest. And this day of rest was to set them apart in the world as the people whose God told them to rest a day a week. Of course, Jesus had a complicated relationship with the Sabbath, or at least he was at odds with how the religious establishment of his day understood the Sabbath. The religious leaders of the first century in Israel took exception to Jesus healing people and performing other miracles on the Sabbath day. When Christianity became a completely separate movement from Judaism, our practical relationship to the Sabbath changed too. The Sabbath day is the seventh day, Saturday. But because Jesus rose on a Sunday, the day the Gospels specifically note is the first day of the week, Christians turned Sunday into the day when they would worship. The day of resurrection became the Christian Sabbath. But all of the rules and regulations that governed the Jewish understanding of the Sabbath didn't follow us into the Christian church. Keeping the Sabbath holy in the Christian context became synonymous with going to church, worshiping, praying on the Sabbath, whereas going to temple or synagogue was never anything the first books of the Bible ever mention in regards to the Jewish Sabbath. The Jewish Sabbath is a rest from work, period. The Christian Sabbath became about not working so that one could use the time to worship. And, we've seen in the last several decades how that's going. Sunday is, for the most part, just like any other day of the week. Sunday mornings aren't even kept with any solemnity in our culture anymore. Along with all the labor reforms and movements of the 19th century came the institution of the weekend. As the Dowager Countess famously said,
What is a weekend?
When weekends were invented, they were at first personal time, family time, and of course on Sundays they were spiritual time too. And then we added in soccer practices and dance rehearsals and professional sports. Weekends now aren't time for rest at all. They are usually just as busy as the rest of the week. If you're lucky enough to have a job that doesn't require you to clock in from Friday at 5 till Monday at 9, there are just new demands that life puts on you. And don't forget to check your email, make those calls, and look over the Excel spreadsheet in your free time, too. Theologian and church leader John Ortberg said recently, "For many of us, the great danger is not that we will renounce our faith. It is that we will become so distracted and rushed and preoccupied that we will settle for a mediocre version of it. We will just skim our lives instead of actually living them. Because there is probably no commandment that we break more in modern days than keeping the Sabbath holy, here's a question to think about. Have you ever kept a meaningful Sabbath? How might you do so?